usually in a mystery or a detective film, you have a fair amount of red herrings. And while this might have one or two, when you take the film as a whole and its tone and maybe what it's trying to say about the current world we live in, nothing really is a red herring. Everything kind of adds up and everything is in there. I mean, if one thing is like you were saying about the feds, you weren't quite sure how that scene was going to fit into the film, and it would have to pay off later. But in the end, when Gus talks about why they might be there, it adds a whole dimension to the film.
It sort of has the reverse of red herrings. Like all the stuff that seems like it's not important is, and it's very easy. I think, Noah. We're sort of joking about this before. Noah hates doing Q&As because he feels like everything's in the movie, like it's all there. But you really have to pay attention, only if you're really paying attention. And it's a lot, it's like even the 9/11 thing is teased a little bit in that when Mike is dreaming and she's in the theater, there's planes in the background, and then we come into the hotel room and there's planes crashing on the TV, and there's a little bit of this, he's being haunted. But you don't necessarily pick up on that stuff. So I think it's kind of like there's no red herrings here, but it's also stuff that you wouldn't necessarily follow unless you really...
Yeah, I remember the first time I saw it, I was a little puzzled why John Rosso leaves Gus and then shows up and Vollmer's right there. But of course that seed is planted early on where he talks about jazz clubs, and that's what he always does in the scene. He knows that's where he needs to look for him.
Mm-hmm. Well, and also it's a very subtle thing, but when I ride the elevator down with Miss Charlie, I ask her to do me a favor and I hand her my handcuffs, and then she stays behind.
And takes care of him. Yeah,
the premise being that she'll wait in the lobby for, inevitably, because I know when I leave that Gus is gonna.
And it also means Miss Charlie has traded allegiances at that point too.
Yeah.
We actually talked about, this has been a sticking point in the plot for everyone. I mean, how do they get from that hotel room to the jazz club with all three of them around the table? And it is that, like Mike said, Rosso knows that Gus is going to let Fulmer go, so Charlie stays behind and catches him. But it's one of those things that you struggle with in the edit. It's like, because you don't realize until you're screening the movie what is going to confuse people, but then you can't. Most of the time you can't go back and reshoot it. We thought about ADRing a line in the elevator, like, I don't trust him, or something, but at the end of the day, we couldn't think of a fix that was clean, and so we let it stand.
Well, how about the narration? Was what we hear always in the original script?
The narration is part of the script, yeah, definitely.
Was there ever a case where something had to be added to clarify?
We really didn't want to use narration for that purpose. Yeah. The voiceover is there.
It's just 3 times in the film.
It's just 3 times, and we sort of struggled with where that third spot. There was a little bit more in the script. Then we cut a scene out, and then we really felt like we had to have it a third time if we were going to have it at the end, and sort of keep this thread alive that maybe he was talking to someone. And but we really didn't want to use narration for plot devices. I mean, narration was for art and for tone and for the message, the point. He's talking to his dead wife, and he wouldn't say to her, and that's when I figured out that
right.
That's not.
Michael, I know you devote as much, if not more, of your time to the stage that you do to film and television, and I know you find it very rewarding. Can you talk about what it means for you to do a film versus to do a play?
Well, it's it's also different based on the film. I mean, doing something like Kangaroo Jack versus doing something like The Missing Person. This inspires different feelings. But I think by and large the theater is very much the actor's realm. The actor is in, and when I say in realm, I mean there's a director and a playwright too, but this is the actor that's really in control of the experience. I mean, you go, you see the play, and there's the freaking actor, and whatever they're doing is your experience. And I feel like film is definitely more about, it's motion pictures. cinematography and 45% editing and 10% everything else. You know, I mean, it's really what it boils down to. I mean, when I was working on World Trade Center, one day Oliver Stone said, he's like, "Oh, you're like that guy, Mike, you're like that guy in that editing experiment. You know what I'm talking about?" I'm like, "Yeah, no," because I went to film school for 2 weeks, and in the editing class, they showed us this, it's the famous Russian thing where it's just some guy who looks like Lurch from Addams Family sitting at a table, and he's just kind of staring down, and then it cuts to a bowl of soup, and you're like, "Oh, he's hungry." And it cuts back to the same guy, same face, and it cuts to a child in a cradle, and he's like, "Oh, he's looking at his son." And it cuts back, you know, it just cuts back and forth. And you realize it's like, I mean, it's like the first time I ever did anything on camera, I did this pilot for a TV show back in Chicago. And there was this guy, he had directed like 100 episodes of Happy Days or something. He was like 80 years old, and he was as tall as me, but he weighed about 90 pounds. And like half of his body didn't work. I mean, he just kind of dragged his leg around. And I came in and we were rehearsing the scene that I did in the audition, which he seemed to like well enough to give me the job. But we were rehearsing with the rest of the actors. And, you know, we finished the rehearsal, and he got up out of his chair, and he went over to the one guy, and he was like, and went over to the other guy. And he came up to me, and he's like, "You don't do anything." Anything. And then he turns around and walks away. And that's basically been my mantra ever since. It's like, you're not supposed to do anything, so it's not really very enjoyable. So I went through, I finally feel like I'm getting to a point where I'm figuring out how to do something without like offending the director. So it's been a productive 15 years, I guess.
Now, a lot of people might think that, you know, this is a low budget independent film. You guys shot it in 4 weeks, right? And and something like Kangaroo Jack probably went on for months.
3 months, yeah.
Yeah, and millions upon millions of dollars spent, and you'd figure there'd be at least the luxury to maybe contribute something, or at least explore what you're doing.
Well, I had a lot of fun. I mean, we were in Australia for 3 months, and that was fun. I met some nice guys, some Australian guys. We had a good time. I got lost one night. I spent walking through the outback because our car got stranded in a river, and literally, I thought I was going to die. We spent all night long trying to walk back to the highway. So experiences like that are fun. But the filming part of it is
as an artistic experience, it didn't really pay up. Yeah. The first movie you ever appeared in was Groundhog Day, I think, right?
Yeah, it was my first movie.
What was that like?
That was great. I mean, that was an amazing. That was a big deal because back then I was purely a Chicago actor. I hadn't gone anywhere, so a big movie coming to town was a big deal. And they hired a lot of Chicago actors. It was really good for Chicago. And it was shot in Woodstock, Illinois, a little town just outside Chicago. And they took over the whole town. It wasn't winter. It was shot, I think, in the summer. But they covered the whole town with fake snow, and everybody's walking around wearing coats. It was very strange and kind of wonderful. And it was, you know, if you were in any scene, even if you were just like in the background, then you had to be there for a lot of scenes because, you know, the same day over and over again. So I got to watch Bill Murray a lot, which was fun. And, yeah.
Did you have any interactions with him? I know there's a brief moment on film.
Yeah. Well, one day he was, like when I was a kid, my favorite band was the Talking Heads. I really loved the Talking Heads. And one day, between takes, Bill Murray had a little boom box, and he was listening to Talking Heads, and I got really excited that this guy that I really admired was listening to my favorite band. So I ran up and I said, "Oh, you're listening to Talking Heads?" And he just looked at me like, yeah, I think it's pretty obvious. I'm listening, considering, you know, it's on, I got this, you know, I'm like, yeah. like it was the dumbest thing anyone had ever said to anybody. And so I was horrified.